Hey everybody. A quick note before starting today's episode. This week's 5-star iTunes review. This one's by Jojo071, and it's titled, Exactly What I Needed. I just started listening to podcasts, and yours is amazing. This is exactly what I wanted to listen to, and I love how open-minded and smooth the conversations are. Really such a great job at putting everything together. Thanks, Jojo071. A quick word on these reviews and supporting the show. Not only do these reviews reflect the enjoyment that people get from Psychotropic, they also help to get this podcast out there further for more people to hear. So, if you enjoy the show and you'd like to support it in the easiest way possible, write a review. It goes a really, really long way. Also, if you're interested in writing in and sharing a story, or just telling me what you think privately, you can do that at psychotropicpodcast.com. With all that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. You had emailed me and you had suggested a story about smoking marijuana that turned out to be laced with an opiate and or a hallucinogen.
Yes. So I actually thought about it, and it might have not. I know it was laced with an opiate. I know that 100%. But I don't know if it was actually weed. It could have been spice. Because back then, it was 2013. I think spice was still being sold at convenience stores. So it could have been spice. Because I know that the reaction that I had was unlike weed. It was just different. And the reaction that my ex had was different too.
Psychotropic presents Lauren. When was the first time you smoked weed?
I was 15 years old, but it was right before I turned 16. And I was at a friend's house. At the time, it was I kind of lived at this friend's mom's house, and she just had a bunch of people that were teenagers that would sleep over. So it was almost kind of like a junior trap house kind of thing. And I remember I was with my boyfriend at the time, and all of a sudden a bunch of people came back, and somebody asked to use their phone because they didn't have a phone. So they lent their phone to these people, and then when they lent their phone back, they gave them weed in return. And then I remember they brought it back. They got this weed completely for free. And I remember they came back, and the people I was with they've smoked weed before, but this was my first time. So we walked over to a park, and I remember they made a gravity bong out of a soda bottle, and I smoked it, and it was the best. It was awesome. It was sour diesel, I remember, because that's what they were told it was. And it smelled very, very, very sour. And I remember on the TV, there was like some kind of like, I just remember staring at the TV for hours. And then I remember there was like a box and just playing with the box like a cat or something. You know how like a cat will play with a box and be like, it's like the most entertaining thing ever? I just remember there was like some kind of empty box, and I remember just like staring at it and like flipping it and like pushing it with my hand. And it was like the best, most fun thing ever. So it seems like at the time, the first time I smoked weed, just weed made everything like more interesting and like better. And it was very light and playful.
Have you ever taken opiates before?
Um, no, never. Like the only time I ever took opiates was when I had surgery and they were prescribed to me.
Why not?
Um, well, the reason why I never did opiates recreationally is probably just because I guess I never really felt the need to. Like, I never really had anybody go to me and say, "Here, want some free drugs?" And I never was like, "Let me go seek out opiates," because I guess of the stigma of addiction and stuff. I never really, like, I guess, like, risk aversion, fear of getting addicted, the perception of opiates being dangerous.
These all just kind of kept you away from that genre of drugs.
Yeah,
But you were okay with trying weed.
yes. I think there's a perception of like alcohol and weed being like in the okay to use recreationally like category, and then like other drugs like hallucinogens and like opiates and other drugs like kind of being like the more dangerous bad drugs. Kind of like, and that's kind of been like a narrative I guess like consciously or subconsciously like believe in.
Have you ever tried hallucinogens?
No. I do want to someday, but I have a family history of psychiatric issues, so I'm waiting until I'm a little bit older and my brain is kind of like, so they say your brain stops developing at age 25. So I'm waiting until I'm 25 to try it, just to make sure that I don't develop any psychiatric conditions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually really smart of you. I would say that I feel like it's beneficial to most people if they wait until they're in their mid 20s before they even start experimenting with substances. Although I didn't do that, I was doing that by about 15 years old, and it's something that I look back on. And while it provided entertainment and good stories and interesting experiences, I do wonder how it's affected me long term.
I also feel like as an adultier adult, like me now versus me like when I was a teenager, I feel like even smoking weed is like better now than it was when I was a teenager. Like in terms of like how comfortable it is. Like I only like smoke and drink occasionally. Like it's something that like I'll do at like a party or I do with friends. And I noticed that when I was younger, if I took like maybe 2 or 3 hits, I would have like a headache, or I would be like in a dark room, like overwhelmed by everything. And now when I smoke weed, it's like I feel like my mind is clear and everything is just beautiful and like more peaceful. It could also be the strain that I'm smoking too, because I'm smarter and I kind of like ask, because generally I do better on sativa than I do with indica. So it could be that too.
Yeah, I see. I would also kind of wonder if part of the reason you're okay now versus then is because you've done it enough times to where your mind can navigate that stoned landscape.
So I actually had a baby when I was 18, and I breastfed for like a good 2.5 years. So in that time, I did not do any substances at all. So I actually didn't start smoking weed again until like maybe 2 months ago.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. So that definitely throws that all out the window.
Yeah.
You're like coming in super fresh and experiencing it over, but for whatever reason, your mind is geared in such a way to where it's more receptive to that substance now, to that high.
Yeah. The first time I did weed again, because I was scared to try weed again. Like, even after I stopped breastfeeding, like, I would come across it, like, with friends, and every time I'd be like, hey, do you want some? I'd be like, nah. But one time I was, like, at a music festival, and he was like, you know what? I'm going to have some. And it felt really good. And I was like, wow, but it was like, I felt okay. Like, I just felt high. I felt like that normal, like, calm feeling. Whereas I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel trippy or anything. And then since then, weed's made me feel sleepy, or it's made me feel clear-headed, or it's made me feel like everything is beautiful, but never like anything too intense. Like, I almost feel normal. Whereas when I was a teenager, it was like very intense.
Okay, so going to this episode where you smoked weed and it was laced with something. Can you describe what was happening in that time in your life? What led up to that moment?
So that day, I used to hang out with my friends at the library, and I was in a relationship with somebody who was 4 years older than me. So I was like 16 and he was 20, which is illegal, but I was very, very, very enmeshed. Like, I pretty much would like not go to school and just hang out with my boyfriend. And my parents were like pretty lax and they kind of let me do it. So I would just kind of hang out like at the park. I would hang out at the library with my friends, and I would kind of hang out with people that like I had this kind of like perception that I was like a reject, or that like I was an outsider. So I had my hair dyed purple. I hung out with other kids that had their hair dyed different colors, or had piercings. I wouldn't say I was in any particular like clique of emo or scene or anything like that, or alternative. I would say it was a mix of everybody, different types of people, but just anybody that kind of felt rejected, dejected. And I was very smart. Like, I would always read books. I always had an interest in medicine. So I would kind of like sit at home and read about like the human body, or like psychology, and like different things like that. And I would go to the library and I would hang out and I would actually read books there. Like, even though I was cutting school, I would still be getting an education. But that's kind of the way my life was.
Were you smoking weed at the time?
So about this time when I was 16, I only smoked weed. I really actually didn't smoke weed that often. It was only maybe from the first time I smoked weed to that moment. It was about like 4 or 5 months later. I only maybe smoked weed 2 other times.
How did you come across this specific material that was laced?
So I was at the library and I was hanging out with some friends. And one of my friends like said, hey, I got a bunch of weed and I want to share. Do you want some? And like, we were going to smoke it, but then like we were at the library. So I think like my ex just said, can we take it home and smoke it at our house? And she said, sure. So she had said that she got the weed from her brother. So her brother gave her some weed and she gave some to us. And then we went to my ex's house, and we were really excited because we had never smoked weed like just us two. This would have been the first time we've smoked weed together, like without any other friends with us. I think that it was kind of like we saw it as maybe like we were gonna smoke weed and we were gonna bond, or we were just gonna like it would be intimate in a way because it would just be the two of us. We could do whatever we want.
So you guys take this stuff home, and what happens?
So I remember he rolled like a blunt and we smoke it, and I remember like I smoked maybe a quarter of it and he smoked maybe a quarter of it. I don't know how many puffs that would be. I'm trying to think. Maybe like 8 puffs or something. And then I remember like maybe about like 10 minutes after I smoked it, the walls started distorting. Like instead of like a wall being like a flat wall, it kind of looked like it was pulsating. And the room kind of like it almost kind of felt like the room, like the lighting was different, almost kind of like a redder tinge, or like it felt dimmer, almost kind of like a fun house, I would guess I would say. Like it was just very strange. And then I remember I felt like then I said, I was like, I don't know if this was weed. Um and then my ex was like, I really don't feel right. This feels really weird. I don't remember what he said next though. I just remember we were contemplating like getting his aunt to help us because we felt it just kept getting more and more intense, like the feeling. And then I remember I started feeling this like very intense pulsating feeling. Like it felt like I was being pressed by 1,000 buttons. I think that I was feeling my pulse and that I was just very sensitive. And I was like perceiving my pulse as like an external force or something. But I just felt like a pulsating or like a poking kind of sensation, and it was like all around my body, and it was very overwhelming. At the same time that it felt like the walls were distorting, and it felt like the room was smaller and the lighting was different. So I remember like I left the room and I went to the living room to sit on the couch because I felt like if I sat on the couch, I would be safer. I don't know why. I guess because it's more open. Like he shared the house with other people. His grandmother was in the room, so like maybe I felt like safe in case anything happened. Like because at this point I had no idea what was going on. And then I remember my ex started like growling. He came out to next to me and was sitting next to me, and he started like growling at me. And he said, "I really, really feel like I need to hurt somebody." And at this point, I realized this isn't weed or this is something else because my ex was starting to get violent. He didn't like hurt me or anything. He just kind of like grasped the couch that we were on and just growled and was like, "Arr," like a dog or something. It was really strange. So then I say, "Can you go get your aunt?" So he goes and gets his aunt. Meanwhile, I'm on the couch and every second feels like an hour. It was really scary. And he gets his aunt, and his aunt comes down, and his aunt she recreationally uses crack at the time. So to her, like she was experienced in drugs. Like she was pretty much our go-to trip sitter that we didn't know we needed. I remember she got us ice cream or something and water. And I remember when I had ice cream, it tasted like chalk. Like there was no flavor. It just tasted chalky and it was disgusting. And I couldn't eat it. And the water definitely helped me and it gave me like a comfort. Like, okay, I'm capable of drinking water. This means I'm not going to die. I remember at some point my ex was like, I'm going to just try to sleep this off. And due to the whole growling thing, I just let him go in the room. And then I remember I started to fall asleep. But as I was falling asleep, I started to feel like I was in a bubble. and it was a very strange sensation. I felt like the bubble was expanding and disbanding, and I kind of felt like this like calmness come over me and then leave me. And I started like muttering in my mind, like, I love my mom, I love my dad, I love my mom, I love my dad, I love my mom, I love my dad, because I was terrified and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. But at the same time, I felt peaceful that I just kept saying, I love my mom, I love my dad. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And then I remember I fell asleep, and then I remember being like half asleep, half awake, and then kind of dreaming but kind of hallucinating. Like, just for some reason I saw Wheel of Fortune. Like, when it was almost like I was watching TV, but it was like projected on the wall. But I don't know if I was just like in an in-between dreaming and awake state. And then I remember sleeping it off, and then the next day it was mostly just the opiate affecting me, and it lasted in my system for like a good day. It was really weird, but I was so naive to like drugs and stuff that it just stayed in my body for a while. And I remember like the opiate sensation, which I didn't know it was an opiate high until I ended up using an opiate years later for surgical pain, that it felt the same exact high. So I remember the second day, even though we felt weird, mostly me at this point, it wore it off on my ex in the morning. We decided to kind of like hang out with our friends and leave the house and just do things. But I just felt like this weird wave would come, like when you do an opiate, how it kind of like comes in waves.
Yeah, sometimes it can.
I've always had that experience. But I remember it would come in waves, and I would feel like very specifically I was in a bubble. Like that sensation of being safe, warm, protected, but also kind of constrained in like an altered mindset. And I would kind of be more impulsive. Like I remember I just felt so kind of like, because I felt high, I just felt like I could say whatever. So I just would be like, hey, what's up? Like, I just feel weird right now. And like, just be like that. Whereas normally I would be very quiet or just withdrawn. And then it would like go away for a little bit, and then I would just be normal, and then it would kind of like come over me again, and I would just be like a little funny. I don't really know how to explain it. It just felt weird. Like, going back to like when I did opiates, like after surgery, I remember when I was high, recovering from surgery, I remember that same giddy like feeling of just like everything's cool, I could do whatever I want. And I remember I was like on Twitter but it was like cool, like it was amazing. I just felt good.
After that experience, how did you feel the next time you bought weed off somebody?
Honestly, after that experience, it really took me a while to feel safe smoking weed again. I think it took me months. I was just so scared.
How did you become comfortable again?
I think that through like being around people smoking weed and seeing that they were fine, and remembering that I have done weed before that incident and that was fine, it helped me smoke again. But the few times I smoked after the experience, I would have times where it would almost feel the same way it did when I had that bad trip. Not like to the same extent, but I felt like very sensitive, and it just didn't feel good. I felt a little paranoid, and I couldn't like enjoy weed really after after the bad experience for a while.
Is there a chance that you just got too stoned?
There's totally a chance that I got too stoned, because I do know that weed is technically hallucinogen. You could, if you do take a very high dose of it, hallucinate or just have altered effects. So it could be. I don't know. The only thing that makes me think it might have been spice is that it smelled different, and that it was pretty dramatically different. But it could have just been too much weed. I have no idea of knowing. It's not like I could have tested it.
Huh. Yeah, for sure. I think there's probably like testing kits out there now, but at the time, I'm not sure there was anything like that.
I think at the time, I, number one, didn't know that spice existed, and that could easily be like sold instead of weed or used in lieu of weed, or that some people use it recreationally and they experience it the same way as weed, but sometimes people use it and they don't experience it the same way as weed. I also didn't know like what opiates felt like, because at the time I never have done it, and at the time I didn't know what, like, I think I just said it before, but I didn't know what testing kits were, and I didn't really think of, oh my god, I didn't, like, oh, the weed was also pre-grinded too, and at the time I didn't think, this isn't safe to get pre-grinded weed from somebody, you should always get it like as a nub.
Why do you think somebody would choose to do something like that? Because this is something that we all have to be concerned about in drug culture, is somebody selling us something that is not what it is being sold as. Why do you think somebody would choose to do that?
Honestly, I think people experiment with their own drugs and think and mix things around, and they try new things, and I think that they don't see any harm in doing it to other people. They think that other people can handle it, or that other people will experience it positively, or maybe people just have that like trickster, prankster type vibe. But I actually have a story from music festival where I was a medical volunteer, and a couple people came in overdosing, and they all had the same story, that somebody was walking around the festival with a vape pen telling them that it was weed, but it was actually an opiate that was so powerful that they needed several doses of Narcan. And this happened to these people, and I just think, like, I wonder if anybody didn't end up in the medical tent and like died or something, like, it's very lucky that the medical tent was there to help these people, because that's what I wonder about the dude with the pen that was just walking around saying, hey, you want some weed? And it was actually an opiate that caused people to need multiple doses of Narcan. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you're lucky it wasn't you that experienced something like that.
It's weird that, I guess, like, the pill or whatever opiate it was, because my friend, and so what ended up happening was I confronted my friend and I was like, that wasn't weed, what was it? And then my friend asked her brother who she got it from, and her brother said, oh yeah, I put something in it to help me with my pain. So that's what we ended up finding out. And I didn't ever find out, like, whether it was like an Oxy or a Percocet or anything like that. But I know that the effects lasted probably a good like 20 hours because I was opiate naive. But I'm very lucky that I didn't overdose. Instead of overdosing, my body just kind of spaced it out to where it lasted a really long time. And I'm super, super lucky.
How did your boyfriend turn out?
Ex-boyfriend.
Ex-boyfriend. Sorry.
It's okay. He's actually my friend now, so, but he was fine after it wore off, probably around the morning time for him, and he was okay. And then after that, I think he wasn't also a fan of really doing weed after that. It took him a while to also smoke weed.
This episode was produced by me, Philip Johnson. All songs used can be found in the description section of this episode. If you liked what you heard today, and you want to hear more, please subscribe. Also, rate and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're interested in getting a sneak peek at upcoming episodes, be sure to follow Psychotropic on Instagram at Psychotropic Podcast, all one word. If you're interested in supporting the show, either through purchasing a t-shirt or becoming a patron, or if you just like to write in and share a story or tell me what you think, you can do all of this at psychotropicpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.